This one's quite a strange story. I haven't talked about it till now. For a long time, I wasn't really sure what to make of it. Maybe I just didn't want to face the truth. As bizarre as it might sound, I think I've come to terms with the fact that because of this event, I may never really have a normal job or a normal career. I'm not giving up on life or anything, but maybe once I get through this story, what I said before will start to make a lot more sense. See, about a year ago, I had absolutely no qualms with getting into a normal job or a normal career. I had recently graduated from college with a degree in computer science, and I knew I'd have to look for a bit till I found a place, but I had no worries at all about getting a job. There were a lot of places hiring out there. I even had some friends that graduated ahead of me, and they didn't spend more than a few months looking for their first job. Initially, the process of whipping up a resume from scratch was the most daunting part of it all. I hadn't interned anywhere and ended up filling out a lot of blank space with just personal projects and a list of my own skills. But surprisingly, I got a few requests for interviews not even a month after I graduated. All the interviews were for remote positions, so fittingly, I did them all on my phone over Teams. The thing that I didn't really consider though until I started speaking in my first interview was just how little confidence I had in any kind of social exchange. Before then, I primarily just talked with my friends who I had already grown comfortable with. At home, I almost always stayed inside and just kept to myself. I had few interactions with strangers and certainly no experience with interviews before this. And so, I found myself fumbling words over the phone. I also don't think I did a very good job at explaining myself. I was confident in my skill set, but I don't think that's what my interviewers took away from those exchanges. Needless to say, none of those companies went anywhere further in the hiring process with me. Was that where I gave up on getting a job though? No. I felt pretty bad then, but I hadn't given up. I actually went back to some of my more successful friends and got them to give me some advice, and they ran a few mock interviews with me. I picked up quicker than expected, and then I was right back out there applying for jobs again in under a week. I was feeling good, but it was at that point where things actually went south. It was the very first interview I got since I was back on the grind. I had been applying for jobs en masse through a few different job listing websites, so at the time, it was no surprise to me that I didn't recognize the position I was being contacted about. It had been an entry-level position for a machine learning engineer. It didn't exactly align with my interests, and the job responsibilities and requirements were somewhat vague. I didn't even have a name for the company as it was labeled as a stealth startup. It was only later, when I deliberately went through my history, that I found out it was a position I never had applied for. Still, at the time, I was excited. I had a brief exchange over direct messages with the recruiter, and once I confirmed I wasn't just talking to some bot, I was psyched to test out the new interviewing skills I had developed. When the time for the interview came, it was like before, over Teams. I had put on a nice shirt, combed my hair, propped up my phone on a stand, and then I ensured my camera had a nice view of me and entered the meeting with a good few minutes to spare. The first thing that shook my nerves a little bit was that there were already 10 other participants in the meeting when I entered. They didn't have their cameras on, and oddly enough, there were no names displayed on them either. I looked at my phone's camera lens. I had entered the meeting with it on. I was smiling awkwardly against a blank crowd. "Oh, good morning," I blurted out quickly. But there was no response. "Hello? Can you hear me?" I asked, feeling my cheeks warm with embarrassment. Still, there was no response. It would be a few minutes before the meeting was meant to start. They're probably just away or focused on other things till the interview starts, I thought. I awkwardly turned my camera feed off. It felt way too stressful to leave it on until the meeting started. Still, why so many of them and why no names? Is that a bug? I hovered my mouse over one of the attendees, tempted to click on them and see if their profile had any more information. "Mr. Smith," a baritone voice had addressed me. "Huh?" I almost said out loud. It had been the exact time the meeting was supposed to start that voice called out to me. "Mr. Smith, Could you please turn your camera on? I paused. No one else had their cameras turned on yet. I would be the only one. I took a deep breath, shrugged it off, and then turned on my camera. Very good, Mr. Smith. The voice had sounded out before I even had a chance to give a proper greeting. It was at that point that I also noticed the other 10 attendees lit up in unison with the speaker. Only one of them was certainly speaking, but with all of them lighting up like that, I couldn't tell who it was. Not that it mattered, though. I was the only one with their name on full display. I tried not to let my unease show on my face. Is something wrong? No, not at all. Then let's get started. The first round of questions weren't bad at all. Most of it was just me reiterating what was already in my resume. Some of it was adding a bit more detail to my college experience, what I felt my strong points were, what my weakest point was, where I saw myself in 10 years. It was after I'd answered all those relatively normal questions about my hobbies and interests that, well, my guard dropped a bit right before the really weird questions started. Mr. Smith, have you ever committed an act of homicide? I'm certain my confusion showed on camera. What? Have you ever committed an act of homicide? I shook my head back and forth in confusion. Is that a no? I was asked in turn. Huh? Well, no, I've never committed an act of homicide. Why are you asking this? Very good. Have you ever stolen from your fellow man? Steal? No, I don't see how. Have you ever told a falsehood? A falsehood? Have you ever told a lie, Mr. Smith? Well, of course. Everyone has at some point, right? But I don't see how this is relevant. It had gone silent. There was no response. I felt like I was just being toyed with. Hello? Still, no response. Why are you asking me these weird questions? And nothing. All the participants were still there with me, but no one was talking. Stop messing with me, god damn it! Suddenly, right before my eyes, while sitting idly on the stand, my phone screen cracked and split into a rainbow of colors. It had been a sudden and unexpected end to the interview. I was almost ready to believe I was just having some elaborate prank played on me, but what happened to my phone at the end? Well, the screen didn't just crack. The whole thing was fried. I honestly had no idea what to make of it. I went to my bed and I just laid there for a while in disbelief. What was all that? Was the only thought I could conjure. And at that point, I had no answers. It was only a few days later when I got a rejection email from the company that my fears actually became a lot more tangible. The email read as follows. Thank you for applying for the position of machine learning engineer. While we greatly appreciate the time you made for us to learn more about you, we will, sadly, not be moving forward with your application. The first bit was standard. I had seen such emails before, but the last line made my heart sink. You will not be making it into heaven. Sincerely. And then it was blank. There was no name at the end. Had I really been interviewed for the afterlife? Or at least the good half of it? I remember laughing hysterically when I read that email for the first time. The sender had just been a bunch of random digits with a hotmail.com email. Who even uses Hotmail anymore? But I could not forget what had happened to my phone at the end of the interview. It stuck with me, even still. As time passed, I became almost certain I really was interviewed for the afterlife, for heaven at least. And if that's the case, I soon came to the conclusion that I could, at any time in the future, had I chosen to accept some invitation from an unknown company, I could be interviewed for hell as well. And so I've long since decided I'm never gonna take that chance. No more job applications for me. I'll make money some other way. Maybe I can make something work out by making YouTube videos. I know there's a lot of people that make a living that way, so why can't I? So long as I never have to do another interview again.